Godzilla, the 2014 movie directed by Gareth Edwards, was the first entry in Universal's MonsterVerse. But before we get to Godzilla vs. Kong, let's see how it all started. I remember when this movie first came out, I was actually really excited for it. There are a few things about this movie I like, but I do feel like there are a couple of things that hold it back from being a truly great film. The story starts in Japan, and this is where we meet Bryan Cranston's character. He works at a power plant, and on this day, there's something wrong with the plant. So he sends his wife along with a team to go do some sort of damage control to see what's actually going on. But the damage is way worse than they thought. An entire meltdown, explosion, and radiation leaks happen, and the entire facility is destroyed, and Bryan Cranston's wife actually dies. Years later, his son, Aaron Taylor Johnson, is a member of the Navy, a part of their bomb disposal unit. It's soon after he gets back to Japan that we realize his dad was arrested because he was trespassing back in the radiation zone. He feels like what happened 15 years ago is happening again, but he can't prove that unless he gets back to his house and finds his old research. After a little bit of convincing, he actually gets his son to come along with him. And once they're there, they realize that the area is actually pretty habitable. Soon after that, both of them are arrested and taken to the facility where they're questioned. But before anything can happen, the monster causes so much damage, it causes so much terror, and it kills a lot of people, including Bryan Cranston. And for me, this is where the movie really takes a hard left. Now with Bryan Cranston's son, pretty much our new lead character, we follow him where they explain to him the monster's origin. They were here millions of years ago and fed off radiation. That's what attracted the spore to the nuclear power plant in the first place. They feed off radiation. It's here where Aaron Taylor Johnson's character informs the scientists that his dad heard the Muto talking. The Muto is what they call the monster. So the scientists now believe that maybe the Muto was talking to Godzilla. We then get to Hawaii, and it's here we finally get our first actual shot of Godzilla. Him and the Muto have a very, and I mean very, brief fight before it runs off and Godzilla goes to find him. And it's here where the monsters finally become public. So we get to this point where the government can no longer cover it up. We also learn that the Muto wasn't actually talking to Godzilla. He was actually talking to a female, and he was sending out a mating call. And that's when the military comes up with their plan. Grab a couple of nukes, lure the monsters to the middle of the ocean. Once there, they're gonna detonate the bombs and hopefully blow the monsters up. We're now back in California where they have the nukes on this train. And before they can get the train to San Francisco, the Muto attacks. Now with the nuke, the two Mutos meet up in San Francisco where they plan to mate and, lay their eggs and have a nest. So Godzilla enters the city and starts this big fight with the Mutos. And while all this is going on, Aaron Taylor Johnson's character leads a team into their nest to disarm the bomb, but the bomb is too badly damaged. They can't get to it to disarm it. So they just take it. They grab the nuke out the nest, they blow up the nest, they put the nuke on the boat, Godzilla kills the Mutos, happy ending. This movie ends with Godzilla on the news and people asking, is he really a threat or is he more of a savior? And then he just kind of jumps back into the water. And that's pretty much Godzilla 2014. And like I said, I do really like this movie, but there are some flaws that really just hold it back from getting that kind of 100% passing grade. I think that this is a very beautifully made movie. Like if I had to compare this movie to another film, I would say it's almost kind of like Cloverfield. It's this real kind of, you have the camera, you're on the ground running with the people kind of vibe. But yeah, that's what this movie is. It's very realistic. It's very grounded. Like the monsters, they really play them up like when the monsters show up, it feels like a natural disaster. Like when Godzilla shows up in Hawaii, he causes a fucking tsunami. And I think that's what this movie did really, really well. It really sold the scale of these monsters. It really made them feel like we are completely powerless against these Titans. Almost every shot shown of the monster is shown from a person's perspective, even sometimes to the point where it's actually through the character's eyes. I know the director, Gareth Edwards, he also did Rogue One, and Rogue One is one of my favorite Star Wars films just because of how grounded and kind of gritty that movie felt. And you can really feel that here in this movie too. I very rarely give a movie credit for being so good at using silence. But this movie used silence so good to the point where it almost kind of felt like a horror in some scenes. They really know how to build that tension. They really know how to build up a scene and make it feel suspenseful. Which leads me into what I don't like about the movie. Yeah, they know how to build up these tense and suspenseful scenes, but more times than not, the payoff was kind of a letdown. And I think that's my biggest problem with this movie. It almost kind of feels like 80% build up, 20% payoff. Because I'll let you know right here and right now, this is a 2-hour movie and Godzilla's in it for about 15 minutes. Another thing that I really hated about this movie is them killing Bryan Cranston's character. Once his character leaves the film, it is very apparent that this movie no longer has a main character. There's a giant hole there because his story, as far as the human characters are concerned, was the only one I was actually invested in. He worked at the nuclear plant. His wife worked at the nuclear plant. He sent her in there to die. It's been weighing on his conscience for 15 years about what really happened to his wife. It makes sense that he still wants to investigate this thing. It makes sense that he wants to find out what actually happened. And once his character leaves, it really kind of feels like the movie isn't about anything anymore. Because yeah, the main point of the movie is trying to stop these monsters. But the entire first part of that movie was Bryan Cranston and what happened to his wife and him finding that out. And you become invested in that. You want to see what happens. And the fact that they just kind of throw it away really hurt this film for me. Because besides Bryan Cranston, all of the other human characters feel replaceable. It really felt like they were playing the basic versions of these characters. And when you take out somebody who is as good as Bryan Cranston, you can tell. And then once he's gone, it becomes very apparent that there's not a lot of Godzilla in this movie. The other human characters don't really hold up. They don't really drive the story. There's no heart to the film anymore. The Hawaii scene is easily the best scene of this movie. There's action, there's trauma, there's tension. It's a very, very great way to finally reveal Godzilla. It's brief, and that's what this movie is. It's a lot of build-up to something very brief. And I really think that's the main problem of this movie. So what's the verdict on Godzilla?